So I'm going to come first of all to Ilona Raugze, who you've heard already, who is the director of ESPON. So over to you, Ilona, for your round of introduction.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everybody. So let me share with you some observations and also the conclusions and advice that we have arrived at within ESPON's research in relation to the future of governance. ESPON's analysis on current and future territorial development trends reveals increasing interdependencies among places. And secondly, it also reveals what we call the mismatch of economic geographies and administrative borders. And what we see that, well, considering that we live in what we also can call the space of flows, social and economic developments in one place have major impacts on the development perspectives in other places, and therefore we see that indeed administrative borders become less important in terms of development, as functional areas of different sizes and characters shape territorial development in Europe. And these range from functional urban areas to cross-border regions to transnational and also macro regions and also to global integration zones. And these links between places and the need also to develop territories regarding their functional interdependencies imply that nowadays a single administrative territory cannot anymore disregard the developments in other places in its policy pathways and policy perspectives. And these trends raise the need really to address development challenges beyond administrative borders and also accordingly to adapt governance, planning, and investment systems and also practices. So in the framework of the current ESPON program, we have studied different governance and planning practices around Europe, and we have revealed that a number of countries are currently rethinking their governance and planning models and shifting towards shared governance, cooperative planning, and joint investment. So we observe emerging shared governance models at the scales of functional urban areas, at the scales of cross-border areas, as well as models linked to specific geographical or functional features, either for mountainous areas or areas around certain lakes and rivers. And we see interesting practices of developing soft territorial cooperation models also around Europe, and Eric knows also everything about it because of one of our studies that was specifically devoted to studying soft territorial cooperation models in Europe. So ESPON's research has revealed a number of benefits of using such shared governance and also cooperative planning models. Firstly, it allows you to mobilize resources for territorial development, also achieve the necessary critical mass for promoting competitiveness. Secondly, it allows places at the same time to develop their profile or specialization, but also through cooperation to achieve the necessary economic diversification at a broader geographical scale and therefore ensure long-term resilience. Furthermore, which is also important in the context of the future cohesion policy, it also allows to avoid duplicating activities and therefore wasteful investment. And also I would mention that it helps to ensure, in general terms, more and better results with the limited resources that we have, and public resources are usually limited, and also better impact and return on investment. At the same time, within ESPON, we have also identified a number of preconditions that define the success of such cooperative planning and governance models. Firstly, we see, and our researchers also have come to a conclusion and the policy advice, that identifying a common interest and a potential benefit of cooperation should be the real starting point for designing such models. Furthermore, we see that achieving a common understanding between actors on the mutual benefits and also interdependencies is much more important than establishing legal and financial frameworks. And in principle, also, our researchers have come up to the conclusion that it actually doesn't matter Either it's a soft or hard cooperation model, either it's a top-down or a bottom-up model. They can be very different solutions, very different approaches that are tailored to the actual, specificities of the place and the needs of the place. But what is indeed important is that there is this, the starting point is understanding what is the joint interest, what is the common benefit, and how can all the actors contribute to actually achieving the results of cooperation. And therefore also one of the preconditions is related to combining top-down incentives. By that we mean a certain policy framework or a legislative framework or the rules of the game, so to say, with bottom-up collaboration initiatives. And we see also that in those successful cases that the cooperation has usually started from a limited amount of commonly recognizable issues that most actors understand where cooperation is necessary, where it's indispensable, for example, in the field of transport or in the field of environment. And this was the starting point. And once you get the results and you get inspired by the results of the cooperation, you can move on and you can expand this cooperation to additional fields and additional subjects. But what is important is that fine-tuning cooperation takes time, and that cooperation really has to bring results in order to encourage people to continue. If it doesn't bring results, then unfortunately we have seen also cases that whatever agreements you have had, it doesn't matter, whatever framework you have established, it doesn't matter. If you don't see practical results of such cooperation, it can get quite easily disrupted. At the same time, it's very important that these cooperation models are based both on the principle of multi-level cooperation between the different planning authorities at national, regional, and local levels, and also involve a wide range of stakeholders, not only public sector, but also private businesses and non-governmental organizations. It's also important that this cooperation takes the form of working towards the minimum gain for all. There is an important principle of transparency to be ensured. Political leadership, political engagement is always mentioned as one key precondition. There is a need for political leaders and political drivers who really believe in the benefits of such cooperation, who can actually support this process on a long-term basis. And finally, I would also mention as one important precondition is that those functional governance and planning practices should actually be integrated and embedded into the mainstream planning and governance practices. So they should not become just as simply standalone solutions or innovative measures that once have been taken but are not really accepted. So they have to find their place and their role and their links within the conventional administrative systems. So we have plenty of good practice examples around Europe, but what we believe in ESPON is that we need to move forward from these examples and from good practices and experience to this as a mainstream practice that would be implemented at all governance levels. And here we also see a very important role for the future cohesion policy for such practices to evolve. We see that policy implementation tools like, for example, integrated territorial investment has already promoted this change and has made also people think about the need to plan and govern their development at those functional scales. But I have to say that availability of funding, of course, cannot be the only motivation. We see that draft regulations for the future of cohesion policy, they currently provide quite favorable grounds for further stimulating the use of such governance and planning approaches through shared governance, through cooperative planning, through joint investment at functional scales. But we, on the behalf of ESPON, would propose to further strengthen those provisions. And we believe that if it's only left at the discretion of member states and is kept only as a voluntary approach, then this might not evolve as a common practice. Thank you.